Welcome into a brand new edition of the 06010 ESPN Communications podcast. I'm your host, Alex Feuz, and we have another great show planned for you. I'm joined with Michelle Smallmon, co-host of Unsportsmanlike on ESPN Radio. Michelle, you're coming up on a year as one of the co-hosts of the signature morning show on ESPN Radio. What's the first year been like?
Well, first of all, Alex, hello, and thank you so much for having me. It's great to talk with you. And I can't believe that it's been almost a year. Like just hearing you say those words, it's hard for me to comprehend because it simultaneously feels like we just started and also like we've been doing the show for 10 years. It's a very weird thing to be a part of because you get in this day-to-day churn, and while a year feels still pretty fresh, I think the fact that Evan, Chris, and I sit in a windowless room and talk to each other for 4 hours a day, you get to know each other pretty well in a short amount of time. So I guess the number one thing I feel coming up on a year is proud. I feel so proud that we got this opportunity. I feel so proud about the growth that we've had over the past year and really proud about the position that we're in for the future.
And we'll get to later on about what you might look forward to in year two of the show. But what's been your favorite moment of working with Evan and Chris so far?
Gosh, there's so many. Obviously, the very first day kicking off the show was a surreal experience. To say that I never thought that I would be in this position is a gross understatement. And I was a producer for a really long time in Bristol. I produced for Cello and Canal, amongst other things. And so I was always on the production side of the glass. So for day one, the show to have my name on it and me be on the other side of the glass as a host was a very bizarre and surreal experience. And sometimes I still don't even believe that this is my job and that I get to do this every day. I'm very grateful for it, which is crazy. But I would say day number one is very memorable, especially because I made my national radio and television debut with a black eye. So that makes it memorable in itself. But gosh, what other days are memorable? I would say us being at the NFL draft was pretty memorable because that was one of the first times that we were all on the road together as a show. And it just felt really big and exciting to be there and be the show that gets to set the tone for everything starting obviously first in the lineup on draft day. So I would say probably those two are the two that pop out as like day number one, and just how it felt to all be on the road together for the NFL draft.
Now you mentioned the Black Eyes story, and I guess we can't just skim over that. So I know this story. What, you were cleaning your apartment and something happened. What was the full story?
Yeah, so when I got the call and got offered this job, I was so excited and shocked. And one of the first things I thought was, okay, I'm going to have to train myself to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning because that is not something I was ever used to, nor something I thought I could really handle. So, leading up to our first show, I started getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and going to bed early so that I could train my body to feel as normal as possible once we hit the ground running on day one. So 2 days before we're getting ready to start the show, I was, it was Labor Day weekend. All my friends are out. I'm like, I can't go out. I need to be locked in, prepping for the show and in my routine. So I thought, what am I going to do today outside of prepping? I'm going to deep clean my apartment. It's just something to take my mind off everything. So I live in a very tiny New York City apartment, as most of us do. And I'm vacuuming, and I went to vacuum underneath the couch. And I had an air purifier that was wedged in a corner, but the cord was where I was trying to vacuum. And I tripped over the cord and fell face first into a drinking glass that was on my coffee table, cut my eye open right here, blood everywhere, immediate black eye. My eye was swollen shut for a day. So I arrived in Bristol, Connecticut on day one to do Unsportsmanlike, being like, hey, hair and makeup crew, nice to meet you. Can you do something with my face? I'm really sorry.
Wow, what an unbelievable story! And the hair and makeup crew probably. How early did you have to get to Bristol that day?
Pretty early. But they're pros, they're wizardesses, wizards, whatever you want to call them, because they were able to cover it. And unless Evan Cohen announced it at the top of the show, you probably wouldn't have been able to tell. It was unbelievable the job they did covering it up.
Yeah, I remember this was before I started here, but I remember watching the debut show, and I had no idea until that story was shared. So they did a great job for that, especially. Uh, What's been a behind the scenes story? I know you've touched on your relationship and friendship with both Evan and Chris. What's a behind the scenes story that maybe the fans don't know about you and the rest of the team?
Well, I don't know if it's one specific story, but something that might surprise people is how much fun we have in the morning in the hair and makeup room. So, as we just touched on, we get up super, super early and we're usually up late to watch games. So, most of us are up at 4 a.m. Our production staff is up usually a little earlier than that. And especially during the NFL season, we're up late. So sometimes we are dragging in the morning when we come in here. Well, we go to hair and makeup, and our crew, Anita, Lou, Ashley, every morning we put on music and we're drinking coffee in there and we're singing and we're dancing. And it just really elevates the mood and kind of sets the tone for a fun show. But I think it might be believable for me, but I think it would be pretty funny for people to think about Chris Canty and Evan Cohen singing and dancing in the morning in the hair and makeup room. But it truly is the most fun part of the day is for us to all hang out in there and get ready together. It feels kind of like college where you're all hanging out and you're having that shared experience together, and usually just rolls right into the show.
Is there a go-to song that kind of has picked up and almost played every day or no?
Oh, that, you know what? There's not, but maybe there should be like one specific song that kind of kicks things off in the morning. Usually we rotate. Like some days Evan will get to pick the music, some days I will, some days
Okay.
Anita will, or Lou, Canty. But usually it's like a station. So like Usher Radio, or I'm partial to Always Be My Baby Radio, which is Mariah Carey. We try to diversify it and shake things up.
Now, obviously, you mentioned just how well you all three work together. How do you determine what you're going to talk about on a show? Kind of walk me through the preparation that goes into building out a show and how that might be for listeners listening in.
Oh, sure. It's quite an involved process, as you can imagine, because not only are we the first show of the day on the network, so we want to set the tone in that way. We, by the time we get off the air until the time we start in the morning, there's been an unbelievable churn in the news cycle. So things that we may be hot on at the end of the show, by the time we actually crack the mics in the morning, could be vastly different, right? So it's that constant checking in and evolution of whatever the biggest story of the day is. So we do the show from 6 to 10 a.m. Eastern time. And then after the show, we have a quick production meeting where we go over which guests are booked for the next day, features that we may have. And then all of us go around the room and we pitch stories that we're hot on. We'll say, I'm really interested in talking about this with the White Sox. The right now, one of the things we talked about on the show today was the White Sox have lost 20 games in a row. So talking about the streak, or I'm really interested in exploring this about Bryce Young in year two, whatever it may be. And we kind of pitch different things. We see if it resonates with the other members of the crew. Our production staff on radio and TV pitch ideas. And so we kind of throw all of that in a Google Doc and have our rough game plan as to what we're going to do for the next show. So usually after the show, after I am done with all my obligations here, I'll go to a coffee shop or go home and usually read for like an hour or two, just to maybe get some, not only well versed on things I might have missed, but okay, this, oh, I didn't know about this. This I find interesting, and we can send notes to the crew. And then throughout the day and night, our production staff will send us an early rundown, so we can prepare for what we need to bring to the table for each segment, or prepare questions for our guests. And then we'll respond with notes. And then in the morning, there's an updated one that's sent down, and we have conversations amongst ourselves and with the staff as to not only what we're hot on or what we think the most pertinent topic is, but how to best attack it and make it the most interesting and relevant for our audience.
Now, you mentioned you used to be a producer at ESPN. So, how has that experience helped you now as a host?
Tremendously, Alex. I do not think that I would have ever been in a position to be able to do this if I was not a producer prior. I know a lot of people do not take that path, that they just are on air and that's how they proceed moving forward. I kind of zigzagged, but I do think that my production experience has been tremendously valuable for me in this role, because I do know how to build a segment because I've done it for so long. I do have a good feel for what content might resonate with the audience because I was the one fielding the calls for a really long time. I was the one that was mining social media to see what people were interested in. I think it gave me instincts in a different way to know when in the middle of a segment, this conversation is stale. Let's switch it up or let's find a way to move it forward. When I prepare to interview guests, I used to have to write interview questions for a lot of people back in the day. So I know how to research people and find hopefully questions that I think are relevant and interesting. And if I didn't have that background and that foundation on how to build a show, I don't think sitting in this chair today, I would have the same feel for what I think makes good radio or TV.
Now, Michelle, this is my favorite part of any interview I do. It's the Fuse Five. It's 5 quick questions. Are you ready?
I am ready. Fire away.
First one, what has been your favorite ballpark you've ever been to?
Outside of Busch Stadium, my home park, I will remove them from the conversation because I truly do think it's the best park in all of baseball. But I haven't been to PNC, which everyone says is just absolutely spectacular. But I'll be a bit of a homer and say Busch Stadium. But outside of Busch Stadium, I don't know how you don't say Fenway. I mean, it is a baseball cathedral. You walk into that building and you feel transported. It feels as if you feel the gravitas of what baseball is when you're at Fenway. And it's so singular and so special. Wrigley to me has gotten very commercial. And this is not even shade at the Cubs. I used to love Wrigley so much, and it's still a great ballpark. Like, don't get me wrong. But with the new scoreboard and everything that they've built around it, it has lost a little bit of that old school charm. So I would just give Fenway the nod over Wrigley in that regard.
And you got to go to the Home Run Derby and All-Star game this year. What was that like?
Incredible. That's been an interesting pivot for me stepping into this role because being in St. Louis for so long, baseball was everything. And we covered baseball intimately 24/7, 365. So to not have to race home at night and put on a Cardinals game every single night for a full season plus postseason has been interesting for me. But getting back to a ballpark, getting some dirt on my shoes, being on the field was incredible. And just being able to be there firsthand and witness the event, baseball did a spectacular job with the home run derby and the all-star games. Some of the all-star games now still feel like they have room for improvement, or you'd like to, or some people may feel like they're lacking in some way, but I felt like the home run derby and the all-star game for baseball was probably about as good as you can get from an all-star perspective. It was really special. I was really grateful that I got to go.
With college football and the NFL right around the corner, what can fans look forward to with a show covering those two gigantic leagues?
Well, obviously, that is our bread and butter. Football is everything. Like, coming from a market where we didn't have an NFL team for the past 5 years and we were so entrenched in baseball and hockey and soccer. It's not that I forgot because we know that football is king, but stepping back into this role, it was just a very stark reminder of how much people's lives revolve around their team and revolve around the football season. And that was a really cool element about me coming back to do this show on a national level, because we do get to dive into football so much and it is so intense and so exciting. And it's this amazing one thing that you can expect that hopefully will continue to deliver, in addition to fun opinions and analysis and great guests to break down the game, is that we really want to build the week out to be this amazing crescendo. And that's what I think is so cool about covering football, is that on Monday, you have, of course, the reactions to the game. Tuesday, there's a little bit more of that plus Monday Night Football that you're reacting to. And then by the time you hit Wednesday, you're building towards that Football Friday where you're looking at the best matchups of the week, storylines. How does this impact things long term? It's just really fun to be able to dive in and explore football in that way. So we're working on some new features for the fall. We're working on different guests that we're going to be having. So hopefully you can expect the same great opinion, analysis, and fun from us in the football season. And this will be new for me because I'm going to pick a team. I don't have an NFL fandom since the Rams were ripped from St. Louis, and I feel left out, Alex. I feel a sense of FOMO that I don't have a team. So that is another thing that's going to be different this year. Is coming up in a few weeks, we're doing NFL Bachelorette, and I'm going to give roses to teams. And then by the time we get to the regular season, I will have settled on one team. So it's going to be a new look for me this football season with a new love.
And you also have fans calling in pleading to you why they should also be a fan of their football team as well, right?
Yes, I've had different markets have me on and they've pitched their teams. Gone on in Wisconsin, who's pitched Green Bay, Chicago, Philly, Cincinnati, etc. And then that kind of got some traction, and fans have been calling in to pitch their teams. And Alex, I thought I had a good sense of where I wanted to go with this. And every person that calls in to pitch their team does such a phenomenal job because it's such a part of who they are. It's like a huge fabric in the tapestry of them and their community, and they're so intense and they do such a good job convincing me that I leave every day and I'm like, should I give XYZ team more of a thought? Like, I don't know. So outside of the Rams, who are obviously out for obvious reasons, I kind of have not whittled this down yet, and the clock is ticking, so I need to figure it out. But it's been really cool to hear fans have such amazing pleas for their team and their city.
I'll be intrigued to see what team you choose.
Do you have
But
any suggestions, Alex?
well, I don't. Let me think on that.
Okay,
Let me think on that. I'll shoot you a text.
love it.
And I saw you were originally supposed to study to possibly become a dermatologist. Do you ever consider or look at how differently your career would have been if you chose that path?
So I think one of the most important and necessary qualities a person can have is self-awareness. And I have to give myself props that I had the self-awareness on day one of college to realize I was not cut out to be a doctor. Literally, quite literally, day one. I went to college thinking this was the path I was going to take. The very first class I took was a chemistry class. And I went to a small high school. I think there was like 179 kids in my graduating class. I get to this lecture at Illinois, where I went to college, University of Illinois. There's over 300 kids in this lecture hall, huge lecture hall. The professor walks in, just starts writing chemical equations on the board, no explanation. And I was like, oh, this is not for me. I am not smart enough to do this. Nor, quite frankly, was I dedicated enough to make myself smart enough to do it for 10 plus years. I just had the self-awareness immediately to be like, you know what? This was a mistake. We got to pull the plug on this and we've got to pivot. So yeah, I think that my career path would have been a lot rockier. Not that this was always smooth on the way to Unsportsmanlike, but I think I probably would have dedicated myself to that quest and failed and would have had to recalibrate along the way. And I don't know if halfway through or a third of the way through trying to be a doctor, if I would have had, the same desire to go into journalism that I did at that time. I probably would have picked what many deem to be a safer route, because journalism certainly isn't a safe route to take at times. So I'm glad that I pivoted when I did. But yeah, I mean, I had no business being a doctor. Come on now. Look at me. There's no way I should have been a doctor. I am not smart enough or quite frankly, calm enough to be a doctor.
Then, Michelle, the last question for you of the Fast Five. If you had to choose someone in your phone contacts right now to be your co-host on a podcast, who are you choosing and why?
In my phone contacts? Ooh, that's good. Can I look really
Yeah,
quickly?
go ahead and look.
Somebody who hasn't been. Ooh, okay. Okay, you know who I'm going to pick without even having to really scroll because his name just popped up? I'm going to pick Adam Wainwright, who I covered for a long time with the Cardinals, who's now an amazing broadcaster in his own right. Adam is somebody that you could talk to about quite literally anything. He's going to give you amazing baseball analysis. He's very into football. He ran a fantasy football league that we were a part of in St. Louis. He can break down football with the best of them. He's a gardener. He's a country music star. He's a father and a husband. He's got a new dog. Anything that you talk to Adam Wainwright about, he's going to tell you about it in a very smart and interesting and fun way. And just seeing the way that he's stepped into broadcasting in the way that he has, I know that if I was to have him as my podcast co-host, that it would be light lifting for me, because Adam's so great. It would just be so fun every week. Because honestly, most other people in my contact list from the media, I don't know if that's a fair answer because I've worked with them in some capacity. So I don't know if that would be a fair answer. So I'm going to go with Adam Wainwright.
Great response. And thanks so much, Michelle, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on the 06010 ESPN Communications podcast. Appreciate it and can't believe, like you said earlier, it's already been a year and can't wait for all the future down the line with this great show. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Alex, and thanks for everything you do to help us with the show. We appreciate you.